Welcome to my channel. My name is Swish. Since I'm making these team spotlights in alphabetical order, there's this weird chunk of stunty teams to go through. Last time was gnomes, this time is going to be goblins, and next time should be halflings. So we're going to be talking about strength 2 guys with stunty for a little bit. I think out of all the stunty teams though, goblins got the biggest upgrade in this edition. Let's compare season 2 to season 3. One of the big features to season 3 is the addition of the new devious skill category. Fouling has always been tricky because in order to do it well, you needed 2 skills in 2 different trees, and there weren't many players that had access to both of those trees. Dirty Player is in the general tree and Sneaky Git was in agility. You also needed a player that was cheap enough that you didn't mind losing them should the dice come up at doubles. Again, not many players fit the bill here. In season 2, the number of players that had access to both skills for a reasonable price really boiled down to the hooligan. Now in season 3, combining the 2 skills into one category and giving a bunch of cheap disposable players access to it is really starting to sound like a recipe for gang foul soup. Now, the too long didn't read of the side-by-side here is that every goblin player gets access to the devious skill tree, and there's something in the skill tree for every player. Starting with the goblin lineman, the addition of devious skills is really the only change. Bomba loses agility access, but gains access to devious and passing, which is going to make Hail Mary bombers available. The loony adds the no ball skill to his list of skills, which kind of feels like it was missing from the last edition anyway. I'm also never going to be able to say no ball with a straight face because I have the maturity of a 13-year-old. They're also going to lose agility access, replacing it with devious. The only change to the Fanatic is the addition of devious to his skill tree. Again, the trend is continuing. The Pogoer only gets devious skills in their secondary list, replacing passing. The hooligan did see some changes. As mentioned, he used to be the only guy on the team who had access to Dirty Player without going into secondaries, but now the rest of the team has kind of caught up to him. His cost went down 5k, but he does gain the taunt skill. He also added devious skills to his primary list, which is something that just obviously should be there, but he did lose passing in his secondary. The Doom Diver went up by 5k, gained the dodge skill, and added devious to his secondary list. And finally, the surprise glow up of the entire game is the Trained Troll, who lost the loner skill entirely. Good job, buddy. Now let's take a deeper look at the new roster. I didn't talk about the special rules because there were really no changes between editions. Goblins get access to 2 leagues, but can only pick 1 in this edition, and of the 2, I think Underworld Challenge is probably the best bet. Underworld is going to give you access to a lot of the speedster stars, which is going to give you some great scoring threats, as well as a few high strength options as well. Most of the Goblin special weapon star players play for both leagues anyway, so you're really only losing out on Varag Ghoul Chewer. The other special rule that seems pretty mostly tailor-made for goblins is bribery and corruption. It's going to give you a 50% discount on bribes and gives you an incentive to kind of manage your team value. You want to try to keep your team rating low so you can pick these up if you can. Essentially, every bribe is a special weapon that gets to do its thing 1 more additional drive. Fouling with goblins was always the strategy, but now it's easier and cheaper. I'd start with Dirty Player and then pick up Sneaky Git to stay on the field. Another option would be the skill Put in the Boot, which is essentially guard but for fouling. Maybe focus 1 or 2 goblins on actually doing the deed, and then set the rest of your boys up as accessories. The Bomba getting passing access is a really interesting one. The classic upgrade to the Bomba is Hail Mary Pass, letting him sit very safely in the backfield, lobbing grenades into cages from afar. This seems like a good spot to talk about managing your special players. Knowing when to deploy them is pretty key. Just dumping the chainsaw, the Bomba, the Fanatic all in the field at the same time sounds like a lot of fun, but it's normally best to actually spread them out unless you have a whole bunch of bribes to work with. I find that the Bomba is best deployed on the defense against slow, grindy teams such as Orcs, Chaos, or even the hated Dwarves. The Bomba's best role is breaking up cages, which will force your opponent to either open their cages up a little bit or give you more opportunities to cause damage. Now, I want to take a side here and just talk about one other skill, which is Dump Off. Now, the wording for Bombardier has changed from the last edition, but the structure is fundamentally the same between 2nd and 3rd. In both editions, it makes it clear that any skill that can be used with a pass can be used to throw a bomb, with the only exception being on the ball. The wording of dump off, however, triggers a pass action rather than the pass action triggering a skill, so there was some room for interpretation in the last edition on if Bombardier could just throw a bomb as part of the dump off. This was cleared up in the FAQ, with the answer being a simple no. I expected them to include dump off in the list of skills that don't work with Bombardier, but it's missing in Season 3. Since Season 3 doesn't currently have an extensive FAQ, you might come across a cantankerous Goblin player who might argue that they could dump off a bomb, especially now that the skill is available as a primary access. I'm inclined to keep the same ruling as 2nd edition, but your league or tournament commissioner may disagree, so I would check with them first. Moving on, the Loony, or the Chainsaw Goblin. There are a couple of off the beaten path skills in this devious tree that work well for the Loony. The first one is Lone Fowler. This is essentially going to work like the old piling on skill from days of yore, except it only works on a foul. With the chainsaw adding +3 to the armor roll and factoring in a reroll, you have a pretty reliable chance to break armor. Okay, now full disclosure, I'm not the best at math, but I did use some online calculators to try to pull up this data. Assuming you're fouling an armor 9 player, like, your average human lineman, you have about a 72% chance of breaking armor on the initial roll because their armor is actually 6+ with the chainsaw. With the reroll, however, you're actually getting a 92% chance. If you added in Dirty Player on top of it, you're looking at a total of about a 97% chance of breaking armor. Another interesting option is Saboteur. This is a skill that the Chainsaw Goblin star player, Novel Blackwood, already comes with. Normally the way you deal with the Chainsaw Goblin is to just knock him down before he gets to, chainsaw you. Knocking down a chainsaw player means you get to add the chainsaw bonus to their armor, usually resulting in an injured goblin. Saboteur has 2 effects. Now, both of these effects only happen on a 4-up, so there's a 50-50 chance you get to take the offending hitman down with you. But more importantly, the Loony is automatically knocked out if that roll is successful, meaning there's no chance of a serious injury. You don't roll armor, you're just immediately knocked out. Considering armor was very likely to be broken and the Loony was going to get ejected anyway, this is a pretty safe way to keep him alive. Now, moving on to the fan favorite Fanatic. He doesn't really need any skills to be great. His job is to knock holes in defensive setups, so he's probably better on the offense than on the defense. Brawler is probably his best first skill to prevent turnovers, and Mighty Blow would probably be his second. The Pogoer is your fastest goblin and the one most likely to try and move the ball. Here I would consider saving up for a secondary skill such as block to keep him standing or sure hands to more reliably pick up the ball, although in this edition you've got the new secure the ball rule, so maybe sure hands isn't as important. Now the Hooligan is in a weird place right now. Where he once had the monopoly on the best foul combo, he now just has the quickest path to it, starting with Dirty Player. So Sneaky Git is probably his best first advancement. Another secondary skill that might be worth saving up for is On the Ball. This is going to let him reposition to mess with enemy passing attempts because he gets to use his Disturbing Presence skill. It's possible the best setup on Goblins is to start all of your Goblin linemen with Put in the Boot and get the Hooligan set up with the Dirty Git combo very early. This is going to save on team value, getting the big gang fouls up and running very quickly with only one skill on any given player. The Doom Diver is your dedicated throw teammate player. Swoop is a unique skill that lets you better direct the thrown player. There's even a new skill in the Devious tree that supports using goblins like living missiles called Lethal Flight. Unfortunately, the Doom Diver is one of the few players on the team that has Devious as a secondary, but it still might be worth saving up for. Now lastly, the Trained Troll. Nuffle bless his big bloated heart. He finally learned how to use rerolls and I love it. A combination of the trolls plus the Fanatic makes for a really comically brutal front line during the offense. Trolls are good at knocking someone down so they can be swarmed with fouling goblins. Brawler is a good choice to help prevent turnovers. Guard lets the troll help the line without rolling dice, and Grab is good for moving a hapless victim into a prime chainsawing spot. In building a 1K league list, I found that if you try to buy everything, you end up with about 5K over budget, so something really had to be cut. To that end, I ended up dropping the Bama and took another lineman because it's exactly a 5K difference. That's going to make my team 7 linemen, a Loony, a Fanatic, a Pogoer, an Hooligan, a Doom Diver, and 2 trained trolls with 3 rerolls and no extra dedicated fans for a nice cool 1 million. Obviously, you're going to want to buy the Bomber first thing, followed by an Apothecary. This setup is going to give you 14 players to start with only 2 special weapons, so you should have enough of a bench to make up for all the casualties you're inevitably going to take. It also leaves some space on the roster for star players should you find yourself facing a higher end team. In summary, I think the Goblin team came out looking much better in this edition, though let's be practical, they're still not a team that you're going to expect to win a lot of games with, but they're going to be one of the most fun teams in Blood Bowl. As mentioned before, next time we're going to move on to the Halflings. Thanks for watching. I appreciate any likes and comments you leave me. And then until next time, Nuffle's blessings.